All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Thursday and first day of the tournament, the NCAA tournament. There were playing games, so I don't know. Did the tournament start Tuesday with the first two playing games, or does it start today? I kind of think it starts today. Those playing games are for actually getting entree into the tournament. One thing I don't like about the playing games, just we'll get to the politics. It is Halitics. We talk about politics here, my politics. And yours, 240-242-5646. Please do join us. Hey, and I'm going to do something here. I'm kind of a little bit off script because I was going to talk about the NCAA tournament for just a minute, and I will. But don't forget, please do click that subscribe bottom right. I was watching Chris Cillizza. He does some sort of a podcast. He was a big CNN guy, Washington Post reporter. Now I don't think he's bad. A lot of those centrists I can't stand. Mark Halpern's awful, I think, just awful. Some of the others too. I haven't even focused, but I don't think Sills is bad. I learned something from him, and I'm going to actually talk about a story that I don't know that he exactly brought to my attention, but he kind of crystallized in my mind something that was kind of floating around back there. And I'll give him appropriate credit when we get to that story a little bit later in the program. But he also said, hey, subscribe. He started out by saying, hey, before you do anything else, if you haven't yet, subscribe. And I think most of my viewers are subscribers. I have a very loyal cadre of folks, but we're not seeing, the growth as fast as I want to see it. It is growing. We're trickling up. But the best thing you can do if you have already subscribed, and even if you haven't, do this too. Subscribe and then do this. Share. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might have an interest in what I'm doing. Hey, maybe somebody who would hate listen, but would call in. I love that. Please, you totally disagree with me. You think I'm wrong. Call in. Tell me why I'm all wet. Don't insult me. I mean, that doesn't work here. We are about solving problems. If you think what I've identified as a problem, and I identify a lot of problems all the time, the genocide by Israel and the United States, this horrific, evil war that clearly was brought about because Trump is trying to distract you from his involvement with pedophile Jeffrey Epstein and almost certainly Trump's crimes. What Trump did, that was wrong. But also because there's a lot of pressure from Israel. And maybe they're connected, right? I mean, Israel, we know, spies on American leaders, American politicians, American legislators. Matt Gaetz, who I thought should have been approved by the Democrats in Congress when he was nominated by Trump for Attorney General, was rejected, even though he would have been so much better, or to put it a different way, so much less awful than Pam Bondi. But of course, Democrats not strategic at all, just looking for that win, just looking for one notch on their belt, no matter how counterproductive such a victory might be. And of course, they tried to take down Tulsi too. Tulsi has not acquitted herself well. She has not impressed as national intelligence director, certainly with basically taking, just stepping out of the role completely, letting Trump make all the decisions and not calling him out when he flat out lies to the American public, saying, "Oh yeah, we took out Iran's counter attack abilities, right? We're going to go ahead and bomb Iran to our heart's content. They won't be able to do anything in response whatsoever." Obviously, that was proven to be false, and she knew it was false. She said probably behind closed doors, we don't really know exactly that was BS, but she just stepped back. She let Trump go forward with this horrific, monstrous, evil war. And look, whether Iran could counterattack or not is irrelevant in the end to what's truly evil about what Trump's doing. Regime change, total destabilization, killing lots of innocent people. But to the extent that some kind of deterrence by Iran could have made Trump think three times before just simply giving in to Netanyahu, before simply saying, yeah, let's get Epstein off the table and go ahead and start killing Iranians and start decapitating leadership. Maybe, just maybe, I don't know, some strong commentary by Gabbard could have possibly made him reconsider. Obviously, she didn't do that. So she's been I won't say I had a lot of hope for her, but she seemed to be the second. Well, I don't know. She and Gates. I thought Gates definitely should have been confirmed. And we can see with the Pam Bondi choice that I was right and the Democrats were wrong. And also just want to say progressive Democrats of America had a flack there just telling, no, Democrats need to reject everyone, every single one. Let's give Trump as many L's as we can. Such bad strategy, so inconsiderate of what needs to be done, to the extent you could have worked with this guy even in 2016. Look, Trump is awful. I'm not making any excuses for him, but the Democrats pushed him and pushed him and pushed him to a point where he just, I believe, is like simply, who the hell cares? I can't work with these people anyway. I'm going to just totally indulge my darkest, my most evil impulses. And I think we're seeing that right now, of course. 240-242-5646 would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Yeah, I focus much more on the Democrats than I do. Well, I won't say that, a lot more, generally more on the Democrats, because this program is about making change, about solving problems. And I think we've seen over the past 40, 50, 60 years that Republicans aren't about trying to solve problems, right? They're just not. They're not about trying to reduce wealth and income inequality. They're about increasing it. That's what they're about. They're not about peace. They're about endless war. But Democrats are right there with them. Maybe just not quite as bad, but close. To the extent we might have a hope, it would be, I believe, not even in the Democratic Party anymore, but in their voters. Voters who say, anything's better than Republicans, but they don't recognize just how bad Democrats are. So that's why I often focus on just the terrible things Democrats are doing, because I want you, I want viewers, I want listeners, I want people who, happen onto this program to start thinking, we got to go in a different direction. This two-party system, this duopoly, this oligopoly, presided over by neocons, neolibs in both parties, has failed us. And we've got to come up with something else. So that's where I am. That's why, if you're wondering why, I tend to talk even more about the really, really bad Democrats than I do about the really, really bad Republicans. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. I hope you will. I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody, especially in 2016. 2020, less so, but I did certainly vote for him. But I thought he had taken a step back from his true economic populist roots to become more of a partisan Dem. And I think that was, obviously a disappointment. It would have been nice to see him also be willing to run as a Green, right? He's an independent. He says he's an independent. Well, if you're an independent, why would you have ever endorsed your friend, as you always call him, Joe Biden? But there was, Bernie's the best of a bad lot, no question about it. He's partisan, and that's an incredible big problem. Your partisanship your loyalty should be never to a political party and always to the American people. Now, sometimes that might force you to make compromises with your party or with the other party. In other words, if you get something really, really good in return for a not so great vote, okay, you might do it, right? I mean, I think that's kind of where LBJ was. That's where some of the more pro-civil rights Dems were in the mid-'60s. We need civil rights. We've got to get this. This is more important than anything else. So we'll hold our nose and vote to accelerate in Vietnam. I mean, that may well have been a major consideration, and I think it was. I think it's hard to say that anything was more important than the civil rights bills. And I'm not going to ever say LBJ was wrong, but accelerating in Vietnam was a very, very heavy price to pay for the civil rights bills. I think what you see over and over with the Democrats is agreeing to some policy that's really, really bad in return for throwing you a fig leaf. So there, instead of trying to make things better, as I truly believe LBJ was, Democrats are simply trying to get over on you. Okay, well, we'll give you a little bit more organizing labor. We'll have an NLRB that is more overtly pro-labor in return for-profit healthcare being fully ensconced, fully established, right? Which is a bad trade. We'll give you, I don't know, what was something that Obama did that, we'll expand Medicaid and we'll have healthcare exchanges in return for guaranteeing an ever larger stream of customers for-profit healthcare. That's the kind of thing. I'll pull out of Iraq, but I'm going to accelerate in Afghanistan. So generally, Democrats giving you a little bit and taking more away from you in recent years. Bernie, though, here can't say anything, can't fault this. He tweeted this, this isn't a tweet. This is was on Facebook. Given the horrific destruction that Israel's extremist government has wrought on Gaza. I didn't even talk about the NCAA. I'll get to that in a minute. Given the horrific destruction that Israel's extremist government has wrought on Gaza, Iran, and Lebanon, and I really appreciate him calling them out for all of those places. He should also throw in there Syria, but whatever. The last thing we need to do right now is provide 22K new bombs to Netanyahu. No more weapons to support an illegal war. So 100%. And Bernie put that above a headline from Politico, which I struggled to find. I was like, wait, did Politico really report on this? And they did. They absolutely did. I wanted to just make sure it wasn't some, fake Politico headline or some, AI type thing. No, this is a legit headline, and I like it. I hope it's not completely definite, right? Bernie Sanders to force disapproval votes over U.S. arms sales to Israel. That's the hope. I think he said that. We'll see if that happens, and we'll see whether it makes a difference. But I think Democrats are far more afraid of AIPAC than they are of their voters, of their constituents, right? They're far more, also, they say Wall Street is always torn between fear and greed, right? The fear, oh my gosh, the market could tank. I better sell my shares. Or greed, no, it's going up. I can't miss out. Well, that's how Congress is, right? The fear of voters disapproving of their obviously self-centered, selfish, pro-billionaire class votes, pro-Epstein class votes, fear that voters might not like that, and greed for the money, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it's not just at the end of the rainbow, it's during the campaign season. We get more and more money. You see the pot of gold from knowing what stocks to purchase because you're allowed to trade as insider trading is allowed. All that greed coupled with the fear that you just might lose elections. We haven't instilled nearly enough fear in these people. That's what we need to do. All right, let me just talk briefly. NCAA, yeah. I think it should be considered play-in. It's not part of the tournament until today. The field is 64. I think that's how the tournament tends to do it. And I don't bet, I don't put money down in any of those brackets or anything. My sons do that. One of my sons actually won a big bracket. So, if you win, I guess it's good. I'm not into that myself because of the fear, right? I'm not as greedy as I am afraid. I'm afraid I'll lose more than I'm greedy. I'll win. I guess you could say that's greed too. I don't want to lose it's not what I have. The tournament, what I don't like, this is my beef. To get invited into the NCAA tournament, you have two roads, or to be part of it, there's two roads. One is automatic bid. If you win one of the, I don't know how many conferences there are, like 20 or something, maybe there's 16, I'm not sure. If you win one of the D1 conferences, you're the winner. And generally it means you win an end of the season tournament. Now, the Big Ten used to not have tournaments. So if you won the regular season, if you had the best record in the Big Ten, which used to be 10 schools, Ohio State, Michigan State, I don't remember, Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. I think that may be 10. I don't know if I got all 10 in there. Those were the long time Big Ten, not necessarily the original. I think Chicago may have been in the original Big Ten. I'm not sure. But if you won the regular season Big Ten, you were automatic. You got an automatic berth. A lot of divisions, a lot of conferences would simply give because the conference can determine who gets that automatic bid, and it would go to their tournament, their post-season tournament, which would be kind of cool. Like a team with a losing record could go into that tournament. They'd have no chance otherwise, but if they win that division, that conference tournament, then they're in. So you can win a conference tournament, or you can get an at-large. They call it at-large bids. Now, some of the tournaments are won by schools that wouldn't otherwise be invited. And sometimes it's from a conference that only gets one bid because they're second tier, third tier conferences. I'm sure a lot of you understand this, know this perfectly well. But if you win like the MEAC, I believe is one of them, or the whatever conference, Howard University, Howard was invited, got an automatic bid. But this is what I don't like about it. To exercise, they weren't invited to the field of 64. They had to play a play-in game. I don't think that's right. You win your conference tournament, you're an automatic. You shouldn't have to go up against, I think they went up against, was it Lehigh? I'm not sure. I may have gotten that wrong. Or no, it was University of Maryland, Baltimore County, the Retrievers, versus Howard. So two schools that are pretty close to me. Howard, just downtown DC, very close to me, and used to bike by there on my way to work. And UMBC is obviously in Baltimore County, not too far from me either. Well, I would have liked to have seen them both in the round of 64. Why do they have to play each other? They both won their conference tournaments. That should be the end of it. Play-in games should be reserved for invited teams. That's my little rant about the NCAA tournament. Bernie to force disapproval votes. Yes, he absolutely should do that. And this goes to my thumbnail, which is voters must hold pro-genocide polls accountable. Well, how do you know if they're pro-genocide? Well, if they don't vote against the sales, right? They don't vote against the sales, they're pro-genocide. And you got to hold them accountable. Like, here's a good example of that. AOC, right? She didn't vote. She didn't support MTG's block the Iron Shield funding bill, right? MTG wanted to remove the funding, the gifting of the anti-missiles shield, the anti-missile shield to Israel. And AOC wouldn't support that. Well, that makes her pro-genocide in my book, right? Because the only thing that could possibly stop Israel, the only thing that could stop Netanyahu is if Israel started getting hit. And the people of Israel said, this is it. We can't vote for you anymore. That's the only way. So clearly AOC pro-genocide. So that said, now we know if Bernie really holds them accountable. This is just like force the vote, which of course AOC didn't support either. We know you're not for Medicare for all because you aren't voting for it. So we got to hold you accountable. We got to vote. We got to vote against you. We got to campaign against you. That's the problem. Bernie won't do that. He'll hold the vote, I'm sure. I don't see him trying to hold these pro-Israel, pro-genocide. And I won't say pro-Netanyahu, just pro-Israel, because what said some huge percentage, 2/3 of Israelis support the ethnic cleansing. But yeah, Bernie was a better choice in 2020, a much better choice. Bernie was actually a good choice in 2016. 2020, he was better than the other options. But in 2016, he was a truly good choice. And there were no good choices otherwise. Sanders is introducing joint resolutions of disapproval today over several arms sales to Israel. And there are 3 co-sponsors. Chris Van Hollen, my senator, Jeff Merkley of Oregon, and Peter Welch of Vermont. So that is good. And obviously they're going to earn the ire of AIPAC. Now, I would say that kind of makes them anti-genocide, right? I mean, Bernie does point out that we have to stop Israel from all the, given all the carnage they've already wrought. I don't think he's used the term genocide. I remember I had this discussion with Carlos. I thought Van Hollen had said genocide. He had not. So I'm not going to quite give them even the grudging moniker anti-genocide, but they're less bad by a significant margin than pretty much the rest of the Senate. So, all right. Good job, Van Hollen, Merkley, and Welch, and of course, Bernie. You got to hold these people who don't support that. Now, here's how Politico describes that. If they don't support that, we got to vote. We got to primary. That's vote green anytime you can, every time you can, unless maybe you've got a Van Hollen, a Merkley, or a Welch, or obviously a Bernie. Even there, I'm not persuaded that we're the best case or the least bad alternative is to vote for one of them. Even if you give the race to a Republican, you send chills. You send chills down Democratic spines when they lose votes to the left. That scares them. That's the only way you scare them. And for those who say, well, Chris Van Hollen's a good vote. We want Chris Van Hollen. He's an important voice. Here's the problem. What good has it done? He hasn't done it. He hasn't stopped it. He hasn't stopped it. So if you want to stop the killing, you stop the murder, you gotta either elect a different party into power, or you've got to effectuate a true transformation of the Democrats. And I don't know any other way to do that but to stop voting for them, unless they are consistently on our side over and over, vote after vote, every single time. I like Van Hollen. I probably would keep voting for him. He's pretty close. He's not good enough. He still does support that Iron Dome. He hasn't called what Israel's doing a genocide. He will probably vote for Chuck Schumer to be his leader. He is not going to take on Schumer. So he's better than many, but far from good enough. Politico says the vote could be an uncomfortable one for some Democrats who would be forced to go on record just as support for Israel emerges as a key fault line this year's Democratic primary races. So clearly, politically, there's no discomfort. The right political decision, at least in terms of doing what your constituents want and doing what's moral, is to vote against Israel. The problem is, Arlen made this point, and I hear this all the time from, I won't even call them any blue will do Democrats. I would just simply call them what they probably view themselves as pragmatic Dems. And I have to acknowledge the legitimacy of that point. If you earn the ire of AIPAC by being a responsible, humane, decent legislator, and thereby earn their enmity, their anger, if they turn against you because you care about human life, which is why AIPAC turns against you. You care about human life, they're against you. If that happens, you are endangering yourself. I hate to say it. I wish it weren't so. But you do put crosshairs on your forehead. Now, the best way around that is to have a Democrat Party that stands firm, that says, no, we're all against you. We all hate you. We all find you murderous and genocidal. But that ain't going to happen. The Chuck Schumers of this world, the Hakeem Jeffries of this world are always going to be with these monsters. Today's Nazis. They're always going to be with them. So yes, standing alone, standing apart from the crowd, not only is it uncomfortable, it puts you right in a place where you could lose. That's unfortunate. The only way around that, I think, is to say to those same legislators, if you don't do what we want, if you don't do the right thing, you lose. At least we'll know if this vote is forced vote really happens, whether they will do the right thing. I have gone on over and over. I say to you, I don't even say trust Democrats. Even the best the ones who campaign as true progressives, true lefties, true pro-Palestine campaigners, you got to have your hand on their throat at every moment. That's probably true for Green Party electeds too. You got to always have your hand on their throat. And this Politico story, I was disappointed to see this, and I may make a little bit more of this than you would, but I am troubled by this. I truly am. Nothing that I've read so far, nothing that Mayor Mamdani has done has caused me to say, okay, I'm done with him, right? Like I'm basically done with AOC. But he's come close, right? He's really come. The calling for Hakeem Jeffries to be reelected, that's really, really bad. That's really stabbing your own movement in the chest, in the heart. Likewise, the vote. Likewise, kind of championing Kathy Hochul. Really, really bad stuff. That said, I'm like, all right, well, I kind of sort of get it. You got to go along, get along. Maybe there's some deal behind the scenes that I'm not aware of that we haven't been told about. Like Hochul, there was a video that, and I've told you, I think Sam, Cedar, and Emma have gotten better. And I stand by that. They have become significantly more progressive over the past few years. And I really, really appreciate that. I do. And it's not ignored. But they still have that big toe in the swimming in Democratic waters. And they don't want to pull it out. And I saw a video, I think it was just Emma. I think she's a little worse. Cedar, I think, is a little more, has broken a little bit more from the Dems. It's not a complete break. It's not clean. It's a fracture, but he's getting there. Vigeland still has kind of a vestigial connection to the party. And this came out when she was talking about Kathy Hochul giving a press conference where she said, yeah, and I don't have the clip here, but I watched this and I thought, that ain't such a great statement, where Hochul said, yeah, in a vacuum, I do believe we need to tax billionaires more because Mamdani wants a wealth tax. Mamdani wants to raise taxes on Wall Street transactions, but he also wants a wealth tax to fund some of his redistributive policies, which I support, of course, free transit, bus transit, and some other policies, the daycare, right? So he's saying, hey, we got to tax the billionaires. And Hochul was asked about this in a press conference, and she said, well, in a perfect world, I would support it, but we have to worry about them, fleeing the city, fleeing the state, moving to New Jersey. Let me tell you what, they ain't moving to New Jersey. Okay, so I grew up in Westchester County. There are billionaires there. I can't identify them off the top of my head, but there are some in Rye and Scarsdale. There are people who have that much money. There are people who have that much money in Manhattan, many in Manhattan. They're not moving to New Jersey. There are billionaires in New Jersey, but the ones in Westchester, they ain't moving to New Jersey. They're staying right. They like it where they are. They like their country clubs. They like being, on the north side of the city where it's easier to get to Vermont, to their house in Vermont. They're not moving. That's not a legit concern. So stuff it. Stuff it, Governor Hochul. But Hochul said, well, on balance, yeah, I think the rich should pay higher taxes, but I'm really worried about losing them to some other state. And Vigeland touted that statement as reflecting a sea change in Hochul. Oh, look, she says higher taxes on the rich are good. She says she supports it. So that must be the Mamdani effect. And she went on to say, I didn't really like it when he said we shouldn't primary Hochul, but now I kind of see the wisdom there. He must have gotten a concession. Now, I may be slightly mischaracterizing what Emma Vigeland said on the majority report, but I don't think so. I think it's pretty much exactly what she said. No, she didn't say we need to raise taxes on the bill. She didn't say that. She didn't. She said, yeah, in a perfect world. Obama said in a perfect world, if we were starting over from scratch, I would support Medicare for all, but we're not. We have all these stakeholders and read corruptors, right? That's what a stakeholder is, a corruptor. Somebody who's already got their tentacles in your pocket and wants to keep them and holding on like grim death. That already has their tentacles in the government, right? In the taxpayers' pocket. And so, Obama may have said, well, yeah, in a perfect world, that's what we should have, but the world ain't perfect. So I'm going to make sure the billionaires get theirs first. I don't view that as some kind of concession. I don't view that as a win for Zoran, that Hochul said, yeah, in a perfect world, we would make the billionaires pay higher taxes. She didn't say we need a billionaire's tax. That would be, just let me get this back. So this story does trouble me here about Mamdani. And you can see him there with his advisor. And I guess his title was campaign advisor, by the way. Hey, Ken. Hey, CP. Good to see you guys. I'm voting for an independent guy, but it's unclear where he stands in Israel. It's a good sign he hasn't taken money. And Ken also agreeing with me on Cedar. I wouldn't give him too much credit. Yeah, I give him a little bit because he's better than he was. I think he's better than, for example, Mr. Crystal Ball. And I'm not saying that to me. I can't remember Kalinsky, right? Kalinsky. So here he is, Morris Katz. He was Mamdani's campaign advisor. I don't know if he's got a position in the administration, but that picture suggests he does it not? I mean, I think that must be, well, maybe that's a war room. I don't know. Looks like a therapist couch, doesn't it? Looks like Katz is the therapist and Mamdani's going to put his feet up on that leather settee. I'm not really sure. Some of Morris Katz, he's only 26. This isn't a guy who's like 53 and has had 30 years to, grow and mature and change over time. He's 26. Some of Morris Katz's prior posts reflect the well-connected world the political strategist grew up in, standing in contrast with his leadership and populist campaigns now. So I have a problem with this guy. I mean, this guy, people can absolutely grow. People can absolutely change. There's no question about it. I'm not convinced that we've seen enough from Morris Katz to believe that he really is a true anti-billionaire, pro-labor, progressive, or leftist. I'm not, and that's what I want. And I do have concerns that this guy is whispering in Mayor Mamdani's ear, given his record. So the 26-year-old savant is celebrated as the strategist behind Mamdani's campaign. But before he was a blip on anyone's radar, Katz spent his time praising Andrew Cuomo. And it wasn't praising him in 2014. It was praising him after we saw so much corruption, after Cuomo disbanded the anti-corruption panel that he impaneled, but he disbanded it the second they started looking at him, at all the corruption, all the sweetheart deals and the contracts to his buddies. That was before Katz started praising Andrew Cuomo. He described Cuomo as competent, and he called Bernie a socialist, which is actually true, or at least Bernie calls himself a socialist, and took pot shots at Bill de Blasio. So that was Morris Katz. And not so long ago. So here's what Politico has to say. Now, some of you might say, well, who cares, right? He was a young guy. He was really young. And I hear that. I really do. But let's not forget, Hillary was a Goldwater girl. I'm not. Some people might say, well, look at Graham Plattner. He had a Nazi tattoo, and you're willing to forgive that. He said he didn't even know what it was. He was serving in the military. The blue-collar guy. He's in his late 30s. I believe he may be 40 years old. He's had quite a lot of time to grow from that. And he's clearly the progressive. He's clearly the best candidate, not even close compared to Janet Mills. But I do worry when I look at Mamdani not fighting for the left. When I see him shielding Hochul and Hakeem Jeffries, I worry. If I didn't see that rightward two-step by Mamdani, this wouldn't be an issue for me. But look at this. So Katz, fine, who cares if he registered to vote? I don't care, except that he called himself a young voter in a 2020 post. And he posted 57 tweets, either praising in 2020 or 2019, 2020, Pete Buttigieg. I mean, can you pick a worse choice than Pete Buttigieg? Or criticizing Sanders? Caught between a socialist and an oligarch. Buttigieg looks better every day, Katz wrote. And I'm trying to figure out, who is the oligarch? Is he talking about Trump? Or is he talking about Joe Biden? I'm not really clear who's that oligarch. It's an interesting, I assume he means Trump. I don't know. But this is worrisome. This is the whisperer. And again, it shows you that insular world, even among the Democratic, quote, left, unquote, where you had Juliana Stratton's campaign strategist, Juliana Stratton getting all the winner of Tuesday's, Illinois primary for U.S. Senate, right? The most important primary on Tuesday. Her advisor, who was recommended to her by her governor, Pritzker, also worked for Obama. And she's AIPAC's most likely choice. So this is what we're seeing. This is clearly not democracy. This is the same old. And my answer is vote Democratic. Vote Democratic. 240, by the way, CPND loves Emma. CPND, I am definitely a little bit to your left. I will say that. I love the fact that you're commenting. I love to talk to you about this stuff. I hear you. I've definitely come around to a degree on Vigeland. You wrote you liked AOC too, so that's cool. You know what is the coolest thing of all, from my perspective, is even though I'm presenting a view that isn't exactly on all fours with yours, is you still check me out. You still come on board. You still listen. You still watch. So I appreciate that. Thank you. 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to folks who are commenting or not. Here's what, and this, by the way, this explanation by Morris Katz, isn't that, it's so funny how names come and go, right? Like Morris Katz, that would sound to me like, well, I mean, I could easily be a grandfather now. It's 62. That's how old I am, almost 63. And I guess my name is Harold, right? I go by Hal, but sometimes Harold, but mostly Hal. But Morris Katz, that sounds like a grandfather to me, right? Like somebody who was born around 1900. In fact, I had an Uncle Morris, or a grand Uncle Morris, my grandfather, Jack's brother, Morris. So Morris Katz, it's funny how, and he's 26. So these names do absolutely come back. I remember when I was in college, I had a girlfriend, or she became my girlfriend. She wasn't her boyfriend before me. His name was Mo. And I was like, wow, that's like an old fashioned name. Like, cause there used to be Mo Ginsburg's. My name's Ginsburg, Hal Ginsburg, but there was Mo Ginsburg's. I think it's still there on the Lower East Side where you would go to get suits. It was sort of like a national men's warehouse kind of place. Although I think his quality people would say, oh, he has so much better quality. I don't know. I never shopped there, but Anyway, I always thought Mo, Morris, right? Those are kind of old school names, but obviously they come back. There's Abe's now. So here's what our friend Morris Katz had to say. Before I was old enough to drink, which, is a fair excuse, right? We all had different views when we were younger, but he's not that much older. Before I was old enough to drink, I had not yet honed all of my political beliefs. Do you hone beliefs, or are they principles? Do they reflect your inner core? I mean, that's sort of my question. I don't think you hone them. And I occasionally, they're more than occasional, tweeted things I obviously don't agree with anymore. I'm glad a few cherry-picked posts of my 20-year-old self are providing some entertainment. So it's really kind of dismissive. But I'm proud to have spent the last 5 years on the front lines of the fight for a Democratic Party that has the courage to stand up to the oligarchy and against AIPAC. So a lot in there I want to unpack. And this is, again, why I have problems with this guy being a big advisor to Mamdani. So he doesn't specify, well, this is what I wrote. This was wrong. I believe this now. I don't believe that. I shouldn't have tweeted in support of Pete Buttigieg, because clearly the guy's loyalty is to the military-industrial complex. Clearly his loyalty is to the billionaire class. That's what he should have said. But he's not going to. He doesn't call out the Democrats that he supported. He says he's fighting for the Democratic Party that has courage to stand up to the oligarchy. But it's not that, yes, there's a lack of courage for sure, but it's also corrupt. It's a party that takes money from the oligarchy that's actually an arm of the oligarchy. He doesn't say that. Now, I don't know whether he believes it or not. He doesn't say it. He says that he wants to, stand up against AIPAC. Okay, that's fair. And I guess you could say, because I was going to point out that he doesn't really come across, to my way of thinking, as a pro-labor populist. But I guess you can read that in standing up to the oligarchy. But what I read here is somebody who's just very possibly, not definitely, but very possibly an opportunist. He saw an attractive, very well-spoken, Queens-based New York State legislator, and saw this guy and thought, hey, he's got a lot of talent. He speaks really well. This is a horse I can ride to the championship, right? I can take him. He can take me to the big time. And that's kind of my fear, right? Is that you have somebody who doesn't really have core beliefs advising you, who views you not as a vessel who will make life better for poor, struggling working people. And that's why you support him, because his views, his core reflects yours, but rather someone that you can use to aggrandize yourself. And of course, there's going to always be some self-interest, but I'm not getting the sense that the Morris Katz is at bottom concerned with the people of the city of New York. And that's why I have a big problem with the fact that he's advising Mamdani, and that Mamdani chose him to advise him. All right, 240-242-5646. So what is this? Influential hosts need to unite rather than divide over kind of foolish disagreements. I'm not sure which was the foolish. Is this something, what was I criticizing Vigeland for? Oh, about Hochul. Yeah, but I don't know if you're saying that my disagreement with her is foolish. I think we have to decide where the potential for positive change is. Where is it? And I just am not seeing it in this Democratic Party, with maybe a few exceptions like the Graham Plattners and hopefully the Mamdanis. But to keep them honest, they need to be challenged from the left, I think, at every opportunity. 240-242-5646. Yesterday, we talked about, and Ken says, I truly believe people can change. We shouldn't hold things that happened years ago against them. I agree to a large extent. Call in, man. Call in if you want to talk about this. I really like to rather than responding to the one sentence. I agree. I'm just not sure I see that change. I think that if you want to be forgiven, you need to express remorse. And I didn't really see it in that. So I guess that's where maybe I'm not quite on the same page with you, Ken, but maybe we are. Love to talk to you, 242-422-5646. I thought this was really interesting where David Hogg AIPAC takes its victory lap. We talked about this yesterday, that AIPAC had I believe you cannot look at that Illinois primary results and come to any conclusion other than AIPAC had a really good night. There were I pointed out 4 wins, 1 arguable loss. So AIPAC taking their victory lap, and they do that by responding to a David Hogg tweet, which is always remember, no matter how many times AIPAC says being pro-Israel is good politics, not one of their ads they spent $22 million on in Illinois mentions Israel a single time. And their reputation is so toxic, they have to, focus on other issues. For sure, true. And then AIPAC just says, hey, it's not hard. The pro-Israel candidates won, and the anti-Israel candidates lost. So therefore, being pro-Israel is good policy and good politics. I mean, it's kind of a little bit hard to argue with that. I would respond the way Hogg does, though. It's not that they won because they're pro-Israel. They won because you spent a lot of money and you hid the fact that they're pro-Israel. And I think that's the better argument, and I agree with that. So he just added in response, if it's such a winning issue, why just spend $22 million through shellbacks, right? Like elect Chicago women or elect Illinois women or whatever they were called to mask your radioactive brand. And that's ultimately correct. So who's right? I just said I think Hogg is right. Is being pro-Israel. Oh, yeah. I got you, Ken. Real quick, just replying in the chat. So, yeah, he wasn't saying I was being too hard on Emma. He apparently had written something somewhat critical of them. No, I think they've really come. No, you were saying you think people can evolve and get better. I agree with that. And I think Cedar and Vigeland are a good example of that, actually. I really do. My concern with Morris Katz, I don't know if he goes by Mo, Morris Katz, and wasn't there Morris the cat? Morris the cat was finicky. He would only eat, was it Purina? That's a long time ago. Not sure. He would only eat Purina cat chow. Morris was a big animal star. So Morris the cat, the Morris Katz, I don't know, it's a different name. Yes, Hogg is correct. Being pro-Israel is not a winning message, except that you get a lot of money from AIPAC and they will smear your opponents and lie about your opponents, and they're going to do their best to keep Graham Plattner from winning in Maine. I think that they will lose. Let's really hope they lose that. I think it's going to be tough at this point. Plattner seems to have, despite this incredibly nasty ad that the Maine Democratic establishment has released attacking Plattner, it has the whiff of desperation. For the first time since Gallup began asking the question a quarter century ago, late last month, more Americans say our sympathies are with Palestine than Israel. And then an NBC poll actually said it's 40-39. So according to NBC, there's still plurality support for Israel, but it's super close, much closer. It's either an unprecedented shift of all Americans towards Palestine, or it's basically a toss-up. And that also is unprecedented. It's always been, we've always seen Israel with the lion's share of the popularity. No more. And with Democrats, oh no, most Democrats are totally against Israel. The reversal among Democrats in recent years has been like a whiplash. This is all Democrats. It says there, Democrats and young voters. Among all Democrats, 17% favor Israel. Almost 4 times as many prefer Palestine. That's extraordinary. Of course, in a Democratic primary or in Democratic primaries, AIPAC with a virtually limitless and unlimited amount of cash is going to do everything possible to mask the pro-Israel sentiments of the candidates it endorses. So no, it is a millstone around your neck if you're pro-Israel. But it, as heavy as that millstone is, AIPAC money can outweigh it. And it's not just, I mean, it's just so clear, it's so obvious that if Democrats were truly concerned about winning elections, they would turn on AIPAC. They would use AIPAC to fundraise, to raise money. They would say, oh no, we're against AIPAC. And they would use the way Bernie, right? Every time Hillary would attack Bernie for some identity politics nonsense or something like that, she would gin up support for him. And that's exactly what attacks on Democrats for being anti-Israel will do. Independents in 35 to 40, so every basically voter bloc prefers now Palestine or is moving towards Palestine. Look at this. Independent. So you want independent voters. You're running for office. You're like, hey, if I got Democratic votes, I'm a Democrat. I got Democratic voters in my pocket. I want independence, right? That's why Bernie was a much better general election candidate than Hillary, because independents greatly preferred him. That's also why Mamdani was a much better mayoral candidate than Andrew Cuomo, because independents preferred him. Independents in Gallup survey now have 30% of them like Israel, 41% like Palestine. You think that would make a difference? That issue might, like, for example, maybe, I don't know, in Michigan or in Wisconsin or in Pennsylvania, you think maybe you could start winning those states? A significant plurality prefers Palestine over Israel at this point among independents. 35 to 54, people who vote, right? Because the youngest people don't vote, seniors vote, middle-aged people. 28% prefer Israel. That support has nosedived. So Hogg, again, is right. Support for Israel is not popular. AIPAC, to the extent a candidate is tied to AIPAC, is going to be toxic in most jurisdictions. Now, of course, there's some, Miami Beach, right? High-income New York City neighborhoods. I'm guessing Beverly Hills. Maybe Scarsdale, New York. I don't know. So neighbor areas, jurisdictions with high percentage of Jewish voters and high percentage of rich voters, they're going to support the AIPAC candidate. But that's a very small percentage of the total country. Even Republicans are moving against AIPAC and Israel. So you say, well, the Republicans, right, are still heavily with Israel. 70% in Gallup, 69% in NBC. Look, those polls are really close. They track. But look at the decline. It's a big decline in Gallup. 87 to 70%. You can peel off a few Republicans, especially young Republicans, because they're so disgusted at what Israel's doing. And you know what? Trump is really pushing some of them away. Now, I understand his support remains pretty firm, but even to the extent that the Trump brand may trump the preference of many younger Republicans for a different foreign policy, in the end, one way you would really reach out them and could reach out them and successfully reach out them is if you were pro Palestine. People were anti-Israel, anti-aid to Israel at a minimum. Democrats just won't do it because that money is too enticing. Fear and greed. And the greed is definitely won out. But we also haven't instilled as voters enough fear. So I did respond to that comment by Hogg and by AIPAC. Hogg is correct. Israel is not popular. Pro-Israel policies are not winning at the ballot box, except to the extent it gets you AIPAC money. But then I added, yes, Hogg is correct, but AIPAC still had tragically a great night in Illinois. Dem voters have to be savvier. I hate blaming voters for electing soulless monsters because the voters almost always, and I know 2016 Hillary primary supporters accepted, have good reason to vote against the other candidate. In other words, you generally are presented with two really bad candidates, right? So, that's why I really have never spent a lot of time bashing anyone for voting for Trump, because your alternatives in 2016 and 2024 were really bad. So I'm not going to bash you for voting for Trump because you had a reason to vote against the other candidate. I bash you for supporting Trump now because he's terrible. You shouldn't be supporting Trump. He's terrible. But I'm only going to bash a voter for a candidate if there was clearly and obviously superior candidate in that same race. Well, there was in 2016 if you voted for Hillary. But in general, yes, you have to be smarter. You have to look. You have to. This is the cry. This is the tragedy of our time. This is the great moral crisis of our time. The genocide, Israel, and not just the genocide now, but war on Iran. This is the moral tragedy of our time. And so we have to be focused on figuring out, identifying these genocide supporters and voting them out. Yeah, 240-242-5646, just agreeing with Ken's latest comment. It is really disappointing. Look, I get it. Obviously, if you're the Hill, you're a centrist, center-right, neo-lib, neocon rag. So you're going to promote the nonsense that being left or progressive on foreign policy and economic issues is a loser because you don't want those policies put in place. You're profiting from endless war. You're profiting from, you personally benefit from tax cuts for the wealthy, or your clients do, and that means in the end you do. But it was disappointing to see this in the Hill, and we talked about this with Arlen Tuesday, that somehow there's a cost at the ballot box. There's a price to pay among voters when Democrats embrace pro-Palestine policy. That's just not true. The only cost you face, except in a few discrete districts, the only cost you face is loss of AIPAC support, if you got it, and heavy investment by AIPAC in opponents. But you know what? That can be enough. That can cost you your seat. Just ask Cori Bush. Just ask Jamal Bowman, who I don't think was a great Congress member by any means, but he lost his seat because AIPAC championed George Latimer. So we get it. It's really, really frightening. It's really, really, really upsetting. All right, let's get to one last story here. I wanted to just, and tomorrow will be the free for all, so I'll try to revisit some of these. But I wanted to just talk brief. And this is, I do give my hat tip. I told you I would, to Chris Cillizza. Is it Cillizza? I have trouble with the, where you stress the accent in certain words. Do you accent the first syllable or the second? Accent or accent? You accent. So you accent in the word accent, you accent the second syllable. Or no, You accent the first. If you accented the second, you would be accenting the second. So with accent, I never was good at that stuff. The grammar, always had a trouble with that. All right. Chris Cillizza. I think it's Cillizza, but maybe I'm wrong. Chris Cillizza saying, hey, California is a super democratic state, right? It is. We all know that. But could they elect a Republican governor? And I talked about this before with the, top two primary setup they have there where everyone's in. If you have just a couple of Republicans or a couple of known Republicans and a whole bunch of other candidates, there is a distinct chance with the top two primary setup that they have there that the top two, each getting maybe under 20% of the vote, could be in the runoff. And that means that a Republican would be the governor. So I have talked about this before, but I hadn't in this context. I did block the Republicans. So the two top Republicans there are Hilton and Blanco. And don't ask me what their last names are, or their first names. Bianco, not Blanco. Hilton and Bianco. Don't ask me what their first names are, because I have no idea. You can see that in the Emerson poll, Swalwell has a significant lead over everyone else, 17-13 over Hilton, and then third places, there's a tie with Steyer, Bianco. But you can look at those numbers and think it's not completely impossible that Hilton and Bianco could finish 1-2 rather than 2-3. Probably unlikely. And that's what Cillizza says. He's probably unlikely. It could happen. You look at the Berkeley Politico poll, Hilton's at 19, Bianco is tied for third with Swalwell at 11, and then Steyer. So again, probably won't happen, possibly could happen. How do I react to that? I don't care. It wouldn't. Now, I don't live in California, so you could say, well, it's easy for you to throw California under the bus, a Republican rule. Look, Gavin, I mean, how great has he been? Not great, not good. And this would serve the Democratic Party right, because they went with a top two primary to avoid ranked choice voting, because they don't want ranked choice voting. Their great fear, of course, is with ranked choice voting, people would start voting green. That's the great fear. And the second fear, maybe that's not their great fear. Maybe they're like, there's no way, that's not going to happen. But their other fear is that if there were ranked choice voting, progressives, left Democrats would coalesce, and they would, instead of splitting their vote, they would all put each other first, second, third, fourth, and one of them would emerge. And you wouldn't be able to get over on the people with candidates like Newsom and Kamala and, whoever else, Jerry Brown, who was a disappointment in many ways as governor. That's the fear that Democrats have of ranked choice voting. So they went with this top two setup, figuring, hey, this is great. We're always going to get the top vote getter and a top two. And we might get both, and then we don't even have to worry about a runoff, right? Because we're always going to win statewide elections against a Republican. What Adam Schiff did in 24, I believe it was, maybe it was 22, he, towards the end, saw that he was going to get the most votes. He knew he would win in a runoff against a Republican. He didn't want to have to compete against Katie Porter, who had somewhat more progressive cred than he did. He knew he might lose to Porter. He would never lose to a Republican. So what Schiff did was start promoting the Republican and campaigning negatively against Katie Porter. And it worked. Schiff finished first, Republican second. I don't know who it was. And Schiff easily won the Senate. Now, if there had been a ranked choice voting in that election, it's not absolutely clear Schiff would have won because the second and third Democrats, Porter and not Sheila, it was Lee, I believe, Barbara Lee from Oakland, who was the most progressive in that race. Presumably Barbara Lee, and I think Barbara Lee actually pulled out and she endorsed Porter. But if she had stayed in, there's a decent shot that her supporters and Porter's supporters would have voted for each other to the point where with other candidates in it, other progressives who finished further down, you would have gotten a much further to the left U.S. Senator. That's not what the Democratic Party wants. The Democratic Party wants an Adam Schiff, who's in good with the military-industrial complex, who's totally supported by the weapons manufacturers, the pro-Israel lobby. They all love Schiff. That's who the Democratic Party, that's who the Chuck Schumers want. They don't want a thorn in their side, a pain in the ass like a Barbara Lee, or even sometimes, not so often, a Katie Porter, who says, hey, we shouldn't be giving all these weapons to these cruel despots and genocidal states. We shouldn't be at war with Russia. That's what the Democratic Party fears, their left flank. And that's why they imposed the top two primary in California rather than ranked choice voting. So, hey, Republicans pull this thing out. I ain't going to worry about it. Not going to bother me. All right, folks, that's going to do it for today's program. Tomorrow is, as often advertised, the well-known free-for-all. So look forward to that. Hope you'll join me then, because if there's any time for your call, for sure it is the Halitics Friday free-for-all. I will be back tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon. Thanks so much for being part of Halitics, and I'll see you tomorrow.